Right, even Naimesh is in now. Okay, let me just check if we are live on Facebook and then we'll begin, okay?
Sure.
All right, can someone just log into the group and see that we are live? I just need a confirmation. All right, we are. Okay, super. Okay, let's begin. All right. Lalu Krishnan, I think your mic is on mute.
Hi.
All right. Hi. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the panel discussion on My Path to Publishing. I'm Shaurya. I'll be your moderator. Today, we have a wonderful set of panelists with us who've taken their first steps into the world of writing. So we'll be speaking to them about what motivates them, what inspires them to write. We'll discuss the technicalities of story writing. We'll try to understand how authors come up with that one perfect idea to write a story on and how they build an entire story around it. And in doing so, we'll really try to get inside their heads and try to examine how the mind of an author really works. Okay. Now, before we proceed with the questions, let me just very quickly introduce the members of our panel to you, starting with Kanwal Singh. Kanwal, if you can just sort of like give a short wave or something so that we know who you are. Okay. She's an educator, artist, and author based in New Delhi. Her book, Hanging On, A Special Educator's Journey into Inclusive Education, was published by Loxley Hall earlier this year. She has worked in the special education sector for almost 30 years. Her book is based on her experiences in learning as a special and inclusive educator, a teacher trainer, and as the head of a school. Her book puts forward a persuasive case for change in the education of children with disabilities. All right. Next up, we have Vikas Prakash Joshi. Vikas, sort of give us a wave. He works as a communications officer with a leading nonprofit in Pune. His two dreams were to write a book and feature in a literary festival, and he's super proud that he's managed to achieve both of them. His upcoming book, My Name is Simanam, is aimed at children and young adults and has been accepted by Loxley Hall Publishing. The book tells the story of an adopted child in a sensitive, witty, and funny manner. Right. Next up, we have Lalu Krishnan. He wades through the maze of managing businesses and situations for a living and writes to live life. He is the author of Sparsh Short Story Contest 2018 for his story, The Questions of Choice. His story, The Lounge, was part of the homepage and top story section of Juggernaut Books, and it received rave reviews for its ending. He was conferred the title of Literary Colonel by Story Mirror for his literary quality and contribution. His debut novel has been accepted by Loxley Hall. So welcome, Lalu. Lastly, we have Naimesh Srivastava, who is a 20-year-old writer and spoken word poet based out of Delhi. He is the author of the psychological thriller novel Until the Music Stops. He professionally works as a copywriter. All right, so everyone, welcome to the panel. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Kanwal, I want to start off with you. Now, I was particularly taken by the kind of work that you do. You know, you're in the education sector, which according to me is one of the most honorable professions there is. Now, what I want to ask you is, how does the book that you've written, how does it relate to the kind of work that you do? And more importantly, what kind of change are you looking to bring about with this book?
Okay, thanks, Shaurya, for the introduction, and thanks to book makers for this wonderful opportunity to participate in this online literature festival. Shaurya, my profession is also my passion, and also the reason why I wrote the book. And I've been in the special education field, like you mentioned, for 30 years now. And special education is basically the education of children with disabilities, all kinds of disabilities. And it's been a very exciting journey. It's been action-packed, full of twists and turns and highs and lows, because the field went through a series of shifts, a series of switches in philosophy as well as the educational setting. So all the theories and all the philosophies sounded very exciting. and they looked very pretty on the vision boards and on the PowerPoint presentations. But the problem was that the shift was basically in the theory and not so much in the practical part. So the practices remained more or less the same, but the theory had kind of evolved. So what happened to the special educators was that they were appointed as the experts in this field. They were handed over the fancy theories. They were given the old practices. They were given a bag full of technical jargon, and then they were teleported from special schools to inclusive mainstream schools.
Okay.
And obviously there were issues, and obviously this very committed, this very well-meaning, and this very compassionate community started struggling because they were not able to deliver the results.
Right.
And at times they were actually causing more harm than good. So there was confusion, there was guilt, and the fact that I was witness and a participant, an active participant in all these transitions over the years, over the decades, and the fact that I have experience of heading both special as well as inclusive schools, the fact that I also have a reputation of raising difficult questions and being a little too honest, I actually had no choice. I mean, the field haunted me till I woke up one day and I said, okay, I'll write about it. I'll
This
write
is
a
your
book.
true calling.
Yeah. So, and I actually had no choice. I mean, if in order to be sane, I had to write. So I said, okay, I'll take the risk. I'm anyway the black sheep in the community. So let me just be the voice of the community and not address just one or two elephants in the room, but address all the elephants in the room. So that's how the book came about. And regarding the profession, shaping the craft as a writer. So teaching is a profession which requires you to be creative. So there's this famous quote, very simple quote, which says, if I can't learn the way you teach, please teach me the way I learn. That's what you need to do. So you need to be creative, you need to be innovative. And that's what I did in the book. And in my experience, the use of cartoons, the use of humor, the use of illustrations really works because it's simple to understand. It's based on real life experiences. It's relatable. And it's interesting, so people pay attention, and then people retain much better. And it's a very fast and easy way of telling difficult things, sharing harsh things with the world. So that's what I did. I used text along with cartoon illustrations, and that's what my book is all about. What do I hope to achieve? Very simple and ambitious simple, yes, yet ambitious goal that the book influences future development in the field. And in terms of the readers, it's kind of a yin-yang effect that I want to have on the readers. I want to make them comfortable that, okay, you're not alone. We're all in this together as a community. We're all struggling together. But I also want to make them so uncomfortable, so agitated, and so disturbed that they also don't have a choice. They have to get out of their comfort cocoons and reinvent themselves and reinvent the profession. As simple as that.
Okay. So we were talking about inspiration. Vikas, let me come to you now.
Sure.
My question to you is more fundamental in nature, okay? Because I think this is something that a lot of authors must have had to grapple with. How do you come up with that perfect idea for a story? Do you actively seek out an idea? Do you go hunting around for an idea, or do you let the idea find you? How does it work with you?
Right. Shaurya, it's a wonderful question. Before I answer that, I want to say that it's always been my dream from young age to be part of a Lit Fest and be part of such a big panel. So right at the outset, thank you, bookmakers. Thank you so much. Thank you. So now that I've got that, now to answer your question, Shaurya.
Yeah.
I'm a person who always has ideas actually. Okay. At any point in time, I have some ideas in my head. And especially when I'm not writing, I'm moving around here and there. I get the ideas. But what I do is, rather than letting it just sort of sit, I proactively then develop those ideas much further through reading, through other books, discussions with fellow authors. What I also do a lot is I spend a lot of time reading non-literary material about that topic. Like I'm writing a book, for example, from the perspective of an adopted boy. So I personally am not adopted, but I am talking to children and parents who have adopted children, children of adoptive parents. That's giving me a lot of interesting source material. And that whole reading process, research, and learning, to my mind, that gives you a lot of interesting sort of content. Because I firmly believe that the idea you have is only the beginning. You asked me about the inspiration, but after the inspiration, then what? Right? Then this whole process of reading, exploration, discussion, learning, going deeper and deeper into the idea until you realize the destiny of that idea. That's my answer.
Okay, so you refer to reading. I agree with you. Reading is a great way to develop ideas. I think because the more we read, the more we learn, and the more we learn, the more we get to know about the world. And I think our stories and our ideas are sort of like a reflection of our knowledge of the world, right? Right. So along similar lines, Lalu Krishnan, let me come to you now. I was reading this very interesting interview the other day of Stephen King, and he was asked if there was any one key piece of advice that he'd like to give someone who has just started writing. And he said, read a lot. Well, he also said write a lot, but then let's focus on reading right now. So do you agree with Stephen King on this? And what do you think? Do you think that reading is essential, that it plays a very dominant, a very instrumental role in shaping an author's skill set?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Shaurya. And thanks, Bookmakers. Like I've been saying, it's really a one-of-a-kind opportunity, and thank you for this. Coming to the question, Shaurya, I think I certainly believe that reading is very important. Like you said, Stephen King, and there are a lot of other masters, other authors who have made it big, almost mandate reading as an integral part of the writing process. Right. Especially for first-time authors like me, at a time when we are kind of trying to find our foothold, our style, may I say our niche. I cannot but imagine being able to write without the habit of reading. Like Vikas just said, reading gives an idea about what is already there, what the masters of the craft have done, what my peers are doing, what has worked, what hasn't, what is cliched. And at times it provides an inspiration and a direction when I'm stuck and banging my head against the wall for, let's say, my character's next move or something like that. I strongly believe in observation and experiences, like Vikas just said. But I feel that reading other work gives these ideas wings, and taking the author and me beyond the limitations of just my experiences and observations. So I to answer your question, certainly believe in reading as a mandatory thing for writing. And I don't stick to any genres or authors as such, but I love especially to read and reread stories by short stories by Roald Dahl, Maupassant, O. Henry. Why I like them is the stories are simple. The characters are usually common people. The twists are quite numbing. I often draw inspiration from these stories and merge some of these situations with, let's say, something that I've read in the newspaper. And that has quite often become the genesis of a short story, or probably a new direction in my book. I've also been inspired by Khalid Hosseini, more than his writing style and language. I like the element of, or the theme of family that he quite often brings in his work, and uses that in stitching and kind of developing the plot. In fact, my debut novel is also, to some extent, it uses family as a theme, and in a way extends this into work life in a metropolis, something that quite a lot of us would be able to relate to. Yeah.
Right. So about reading, Kanwal, let me come to you. Now, I think in your area of work, you must be reading a lot, right? Because to do your research, to do the kind of work that you do, I think there must be a lot of reading involved in your profession. So how do you think reading plays an important role in writing?
Definitely. So what you read and what you experience, it's a combination of both the things which are translated into writing.
Yeah.
So that's how reading is crucial. Yeah.
So reading and experiences, yes, that is an interesting point.
It's a combination.
It's a combination.
Yeah. That's what translates into your writing. Yeah.
Right. Naimesh, now let me come to you. Right. Now, you've written a psychological thriller, which personally interests me a lot because even I've written a psychological thriller. So my question to you is based on the genre of your book. And I would love to have your take on this. Now, when you started writing this book, did you already have it in your mind that it would be a psychological thriller, or was it something that wasn't really planned and it ended up being that way?
Thank you for the question, Shaurya. So, I think it directly follows from your question about is reading important. So I think it was around the time that I was reading Gone Girl, and there's a big twist in the middle, and the book turns on its head, and I was left holding my head. So I think that was kind of the time that I decided to write a psychological thriller. And so after reading Gone Girl, I read all the books, classics of this genre, be it The Girl on the Train, The Shining, Rebecca, Shutter Island, all of them. So I think I got a sense of what the author tries to do, what the reader is expected to do in a psychological thriller, and that is when I got into this genre. So what particularly interests me about this genre is that you don't just get to play with the characters' head, you get to play with the minds of the readers as well.
Right.
You leave them little clues, and then all the twists and the suspense, it keeps building up. So it was definitely a decision I took before writing the book, and I think that it turned out well.
Right. Gone Girl and The Shining are two of my favorites as well. So we were talking about planning. So would you say that when it comes to planning, it differs from one author to the other? I mean, I guess some people like to plan every intricate detail before they start writing the book. And there are some people who just take it as it comes, wing it, so to say.
So I think that is definitely a subjective question. So for me, I think it was more about I had the outline of the story, and then each intricate detail, because the story takes a life of its own when you start writing it. Definitely. You can't judge beforehand what a character is going to do in the middle of the story. So I think as the character develops, as the story develops, then you keep on plugging those intricate details. And then when you look back at it, it's a complete story that really flows.
So since it's a subjective question, let me open it to Vikas and Lalu Krishnan as well. What do you guys think? I mean, do you prefer that everything should be planned beforehand, or do you belong to the school of thought that I'll take it as it comes, let me just wing it? What is your approach?
Yeah. Should I?
Yeah. Go for it.
I'll answer.
Yeah. So what I believe is, how the way it works for me is, I kind of have a broad theme, a loose theme around which the story will rotate. But I will be quite flexible to change my approach, to change my, the way the characters evolve, based on various things, like I said a little while back, whenever I get stuck on the character's next move or something like that, basis what I read, or my any of my other experiences or observations that I go through in my daily life, that could probably inspire the next move of my character or the next direction of my book. But I do have, whenever I start a book, this is my second book that I'll be starting, but whenever I start a book, I have the loose plot or the loose, theme around which the story or the plot would develop.
Right. Vikas, what about you?
Well, I really admire Lalu for organization. In my case, actually, what I do is I have a scene. Like there's a visual image in my mind of some activity or something. That's it. And as I start writing, because I have a target of writing every day.
Right.
So as I start writing more and more, slowly, what happens is I'm discovering the story. It's
Right.
like the story is unfolding itself to me. And as it goes by, what happens is I run into, there are certain points of time where I run into roadblocks. For example, this character is not going further, or for example, this story is not going anywhere. So at that stage, what I do is I put aside the story for a little while. I do some reading, expose myself to new ideas, talk to a variety of people. And in this whole process, what happens is you start developing a broad kind of outline or a broad framework. You don't know like the details that unfolds, but through this process, I would say that if there are any places where you need to change, you are quite flexible. So you don't get locked into a particular thing, because what I found as authors is, at least for me, is if I become very, very rigid about a particular outline, it can often be quite counterproductive, because so you have a particular idea in your head. It sounds very impressive. I think some of the other authors probably could relate to this. But when you actually start writing it, it just doesn't turn out the way you want. It sound on paper, it doesn't sound that great. And then you realize the idea which you thought was actually useless was actually, that was the best idea. In fact, there's that eureka moment. Like even in my first book, I experienced it. I suddenly realized, okay, this is the idea, this is the concept. And then from there, writing becomes very smooth because you know exactly what to do.
Right. Naimish, let me come to you again. You spoke about some of your favorite books. Can you tell me a bit more about what is it about thrillers? What is it about psychological thrillers that really sort of like, that really motivated you to go for it? And any other, with regards to your second book or your third books, will you be exploring more genres, or is it going to be thrillers that you'll be sticking to?
Okay, so psychological thrillers, as I said earlier also. So I think you have the chance of playing with the reader's mind,
right?
And I think I can't stress that enough. So you leave them little clues, you build up the suspense, and it's all about the character is reacting one way and how is the reader interpreting it. Because most of the time in psychological thrillers, the line between fiction and reality, for a reader at least, is blurred in that sense. So when you read Shutter Island, when you read Gone Girl, and you realize that everything that you thought was true isn't that way. And I think that is one of the main reasons that I got into it, because that element of surprise, that element of suspense, I don't think you get anywhere else. So with regards to thrillers, I definitely think I'll be exploring more of it, because the psychological thriller genre is more about the human psychology, how we act, how we think, how we speak. And when you just put it into writing, you just get a complex understanding of how the human mind works, how we behave, and every single movement, every single action has a meaning. And just putting it down on paper really works for me, I think. So definitely exploring more of psychological thrillers in the future.
All right. I think we have just enough time to take a couple of audience questions. Okay. Purva Grover asks, a lesson I learned was that writing was easier than promoting a book. Writing and editing seems like a cakewalk. Do you agree with that? Would any one of you like to take that?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I said, sorry. The question is, Purva Grover asks this question. She says, a lesson I learned was that writing was easier than promoting the book. Writing and editing seems like a cakewalk, but then when it comes to promoting the book, when it comes to marketing a book, that's when the real trouble begins. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Come and go for it.
Yeah, so actually for me, my aim was a little different, because it was not really marketing. It was not reaching out to numbers. It was more of reaching out to the right people, because it's a focused book. It's about the special education community. So for me, it was a little different. So I don't know about the others.
Right. Vikas, I think you had something to say.
I think at least to add to what Kanwal is saying, is that the market is very fragmented in India, across states, across cities, across age groups. So what happens is it's quite challenging to distinguish between who is actually our target audience and who might just be interested from a sort of casual point of view. So it's important to have a clear target audience. Like in my case, I'm writing a book for children, and in the buyers of the book are mostly parents. So it's quite challenging to figure out how to get them to convince them to buy the book. So that's a challenge.
Right. Lalu
Yeah,
Krishnan?
so my the limited experience that I have, I think the question is really apt. Leave alone marketing, even getting published, compared to the amount of effort you put in writing and editing, that certainly looks like a cakewalk when you bang your head against the wall to get published. And that is where I really thank bookmakers for for handholding me into this situation. And like I mentioned, my book is yet to be published. It's just got accepted, and I certainly believe that I'll get good support from this agency for my marketing activities as well.
Right. Nemish, what about you?
So I think when, as a new author, you start writing a book, you understand that the writing process is going to be difficult. You're going to bang your head against the wall, and you just think, if I complete this book, if it's a good book, then everything will turn out well. But then when you write it and it's time to get it published, that's when you realize that the real struggle is beginning now. So the second part of the struggle, the publishing part, the marketing part, it's not expected for a new author. I think if we have a clear understanding that writing is just half a part of it, it would be better for us when that reality hits later on.
Yeah. I think we have time for one more question. Okay, so Meenakshi asks, what aspect of your writing process do you enjoy the most? Anyone who wants to take this? Vikas, how about you? What is it about writing that you really enjoy?
What I really enjoy most is when you take a superficial or a sketchy idea in your head and you deepen that concept. You really deepen it and you make it richer, make it to see, from the first draft to the second draft to the third draft, to see very immature ideas, grow and take on a power of their own. It's really becoming rich. That is what I enjoy.
Because the imaginary world that you've created, it starts looking more real. I think that is the most fascinating thing about writing. Anyone else who'd like to add something more to it? Nemish, Lalu Krishnan, anything?
So for me, it's you start with a blank canvas, a blank piece of paper, and it's about creating something from nothing. That is when you start. There is nothing when you start, and at the end you have a complete story full of characters or full of life. Everything has its own meaning. So I think that is the part I enjoy the most, creating something out of a small idea, a small spark.
Completely agree. And I mean, when that small idea plants itself in your head and then it blossoms, there are so many possibilities that come. And then, there's all these characters and the way they come together, everything is really, really like amazing. Lalu Krishnan, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I completely agree with all three of you, Vikas, Naimesh, and you, Shaurya. That is exactly what excites me also, a bunch of sketchy ideas really taking shape. More like, I'm a very, very visual person. So when I write, I kind of imagine how it would be in real life or in a film, let's say. So, when I finally read the, let's say the second draft, third draft, or towards the final draft, when I kind of visualize things, how it would look in real life, that's what that process kind of gives me a kick and makes me really feel proud of the whole process.
Right. Kanwal, can you very shortly give us a different take on this, because you come from the education sector? I'd really like your take on this. Which aspect of writing do you really like the most? Because coming from a non-fiction background.
Okay. So for me, again, it's very different. So for me, it wasn't easy in the sense it was a struggle. I mean, I took about 3 or 4 years to get my 11 drafts ready. And so I enjoyed it, but also I also became a weird person because my mind was like a battlefield. There was constant conflict. How honest should I be? What to write? How not to offend people? You're hit by waves of emotions, now.
Right.
So today I'm happy. Next day I'm wondering why I took this decision. And then the thing is that ideas can come anytime and anywhere.
Right.
So I became this strange person. I'm part of a conversation, but I get an idea and I'm thinking about that and not really hearing what the person is saying. So you become a little weird. And then of course you do a lot. So in this process, I've done a lot of online shopping, which stuff I didn't need. And I've watched a lot of videos which I didn't need to see.
Right.
I know what real videos are. So this was my journey, actually. I became a strange person. But from the first draft to the 11th draft, it was all worth the effort.
Right.
And of course, when you see the book, and it's a different feeling altogether when you see it in print, so that it makes everything like worthwhile.
Right.
So that's my journey.
Yes, so I think that's all the time that we have for now. Before I end this segment, I'd just like to say that there's a story in each one of us, and all we need to do is take that first step. And I just realized that sounds very cheesy. Okay.
But it's true.
It is true, yes.
Yeah.
So thank you all the members of the panel for being here with us. I would like to thank the audience for attending the session. And do stick around. We have some great sessions lined up for you, starting with the long and short of short stories, what draws authors to collections. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you.